Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Transform Your Birth podcast. We've had some great feedback around these little teaching sessions, so I thought I'd do another one today. And this is a very big topic and one very close to my heart. We're going to look at the breathing. You'll often see on TV programs and things where the woman's in labor and the partner says, breathe, just breathe. And it stirs her up and she wants to smack someone, which is understandable when you're in the intensity of labor and somebody tells you to breathe like you're not breathing already. However, the whole concept of breathing is one of the most powerful, significant tools in the toolkit that women can use to not just get through labor, but to make labor more manageable and to actually change the way she experiences those sensations. So it's a very, very powerful tool when people understand how it works and the breathing physiology, which I'm going to cover today. Now, full disclosure, I've been a breathing educator and retrainer for over 8 years, and I have worked with hundreds of people, helping them to retrain their breathing. Now, this was a wonderful career. I got very interested in breathing because of my work in birth. I knew it was a game changer, and I could see the difference in women who were focusing on their breath or had learnt to breathe really, really well. It made a big difference. So I wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of breathing. And I learned from a wonderful mentor, Tess Graham, a woman who had a dedicated breathing clinic for 25 years. And I basically got taught by Tess and mentored through for Tess for years, and helping people to retrain their breathing, which is a really interesting concept to realize that the way we breathe is something that's automatic. It's automated in the back of our brain. And we can change that. We can change the brain's set point. So all of us every day have a particular baseline breathing pattern. And that baseline breathing pattern is oriented towards the way you breathe when you're not thinking about breathing. And it encompasses things like CO2 levels in your blood, the pattern of your breathing, whether you tend to take deep breaths, whether you cough, sneeze, snoring, all of these different things that we do with breathing is basically comes back to your setting, your default setting. Now, the good thing about breathing is it's governed by two sets of muscles and nerves. So even though it is an automatic response in the body, we can impose patterns on the automatic response and over time retrains the involuntary system or the automatic response to be breathing better when you're no longer thinking about breathing. So it's helpful to realize that we can retrain our breathing. And I've done this with hundreds of people now, which was just a really powerful phase of my own career. So before I get into that in more detail, let's just look at why breathing is so powerful. The first point I want to make is the breath is the pathway to the relaxation response. So the way you breathe is going to influence whether you feel relaxed or whether you're stressed. It's going to influence, it changes in every moment of every day. According to what you're doing, your breathing will change dependent primarily on your emotional response. So whether you're more relaxed, whether you're stressed or anything in between, your breathing will follow suit. Now, the breathing also, when we start to breathe in a way that does elicit the deep relaxation response, which is the perfect physiology to go in with when it comes to having a baby, when you're deeply relaxed through labor, you can activate the right cocktail of hormones. You keep stress hormones at bay, which will interfere with those beautiful, feel-good, performance-enhancing hormones. And the breath supports you to stay in that deeply relaxed place. The other thing that the breath does is that it also is kind of like the key that opens the door to the subconscious. So when you're in a deeply relaxed state, you're saying to your subconscious that I'm not being chased by a tiger, I'm safe and I'm open. And what that means is that you're open to new ways of thinking, feeling, and being. Now, that's a good thing when you're trying to change the way that you respond to labor, when you're trying to upgrade your system so that you're learning to work with birth, not against it. So working subconsciously also is a powerful tool, and it gets supported by the way you breathe. So when you're breathing in that lovely, calm, gentle way, you're going to be more receptive to changing the way you think and feel. And primarily the breath also supports that uterus to do the job. Okay, so the uterus is a muscle. It's a big, powerful muscle. It's the biggest, most powerful muscle in the human body because its job is to push out a baby. And so in order to do that, muscles need lots of blood and oxygen. So how you breathe is going to influence the blood and oxygen that you're able to send through to your uterus. So if you can breathe optimally, which gives you the most amount of oxygen, then your uterus it doesn't cramp, it doesn't get as painful, and it requires less effort for that muscle to do what it needs. When muscles don't get enough blood and oxygen, they become ischemic or they cramp up and become very painful. So your breath is the absolute pathway to bringing as much oxygen to that muscle as you can. Okay, so that's why breathing is such a powerful tool. All right, now I'm going to talk about the myths of breathing. There's a lot of myths around breathing. People have been interfering with breathing for a long time, trying to get people to breathe better. And in my experience as a breathing educator, I used to have to remind people that your body knows how to breathe, but let's change the conditions so you breathe better. In other words, let's create the right conditions for you to get more out of each breath. So, but we've sort of, identified breathing as important, and we often do things like do breathing practices. Now, yogic practices, and I can talk about this because I've loved yoga. It's been one of my most powerful forms of health and well-being, is doing yoga. When we do pranayama practices or breathing practices in yoga, they're more designed to have a special effect in the body. So that special effect is part of helping the body to go into different movements, patterns of movement, and different responses. What I'm teaching you now is not breathing practices. It's not special effects breathing. It's optimal physiological breathing, which is breathing in the way the body's designed to breathe to give you the most oxygen. Okay, so it's essentially normal breathing, but very few people actually breathe optimally. Okay, now the myths around breathing, often as a result of breathing practices, are things like deep breathing, that you need to breathe deeply. Just think for a moment if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you've been really anxious or overwhelmed by a situation, and you're finding, your chest is getting tight, your heart's racing, you're getting really quite panicked, and somebody says to you, just settle down, just take a deep breath. And we say that to people all the time. Now, when they're in that state, they're over breathing. When you get a person to take a deep breath while they're over breathing, that makes it worse. Have you had that experience where people said, take a deep breath, and you've tried and you just can't? Okay, because you're on a pathway towards hyperventilation, or you could be actually hyperventilating. And to take a deep breath when you're hyperventilating makes it worse, not better. So the deep breathing myth is one of the biggest myths we've got around breathing. If it has worked for you, it's probably worked for you because it's helped you to slow your breathing down. So the deep breathing myth is one of them. The other one is breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And I often like to demonstrate this and say to people, does this look normal? So you breathe in and then breathe out through your mouth. Does that look normal? Could you sustain that? No, you can't. Good breathing requires nose breathing. Okay, in through the nose, out through the nose. The mouth is the backup system. If your nose gets stuffy or blocked in some way, then you use the mouth and you breathe gently through the mouth. it's the backup system. But the nose is the perfect mechanism for breathing because it's got little hairs inside which clean and filter the air and warms the air, and it doesn't, when you nose breathe, you're less likely to overbreathe. And I'll talk more about what that is very soon. So they're just a few of the myths around breathing. When I teach breathing, I try to really emphasize that the body has an intelligence to it, that you have your own natural rhythm in your own natural way, but let's create the right conditions so you get more out of each breath. And that doesn't require a lot of changes, but I'll talk about that very soon. So, overbreathing, what is that? This is something everybody should know what overbreathing is. Now, this comes down to how much air we take in with each breath. Another term for that would be called breathing volume. Now, if you can imagine, every time you take a breath, you breathe in a little cloud. Now, the cloud that gives us the most oxygen is somewhere between 400 to 600 mils. So say on average, a 500 mil cloud will give you the most oxygen. Very few people breathe a 500 mil cloud. Most people overbreathe. They take in a much bigger cloud, and they do it by either breathing really fast, so a high respiration rate, or their mouth is open and their nose as well, and they're trying to get more air into their lungs through the nose and through the mouth. Now, you're probably thinking, well, hang on, if you take in more air, surely that's better for your body. Well, the problem with overbreathing is that it comes at the cost of a very important gas, which we hear a lot about these days, and that is carbon dioxide. Now, when I was at school, we were taught carbon dioxide is a waste gas. You breathe in oxygen, you breathe out carbon dioxide. But it's not actually a waste gas. It's a very important gas. Carbon dioxide is the mechanism that releases the oxygen from the blood. So we can take in as much oxygen as we like, but if we don't have enough CO2 in our blood, we can't make use of that oxygen. We call this the Bohr effect, B-O-H-R, if you want to look it up. It was a Danish physician who discovered the role of CO2 in helping the oxygen to get to where it needs to go. So oxygen and carbon dioxide work together. I'll give you an example of overbreathing. I'm sure you'll all relate to this. Blowing up a balloon. Have you ever blown up a balloon? You take a big breath in and a big breath out. And if big cloud breathing meant more oxygen, you'd feel great doing that, wouldn't you? But you don't. You often feel lightheaded, dizzy, a bit faint. And the reason you feel that way is because when you take a deep breath in and a deep breath out, you're pushing a lot of CO2 into that balloon. So when you take the next breath in, your body can't make use of it because you haven't got as much CO2 in your blood. And when you can't make use of that oxygen, the body is incredibly intelligent. It says to the brain, sorry, brain, you're a big user of energy. I can't give you the oxygen. I've got to keep the organs going. And the first place that often gets starved of oxygen is the brain. So that's how we know when we're overbreathing often. It's one of the first symptoms that we'll feel is that lightheaded, dizzy, faint type of feeling that comes from less carbon dioxide in the blood. So really, overbreathing is a form of hidden hyperventilation. In its extreme form, we call it hyperventilation. And when people hyperventilate, what do? We usually get them to breathe into a paper bag. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever wondered why that works? The reason it works is because when you give them a paper bag, they're breathing back in their carbon dioxide, which then means they can make use of their oxygen. So this is a very powerful concept to understanding the role of breathing volume. How much we breathe in and how much we release, particularly with CO2, will influence how much oxygen we get. So let me tell you now what makes for good breathing. Good breathing starts with good posture. Yes, go figure. Posture is one of the biggest things around breathing. And the reason for that is because of the diaphragm. Now, when we sit for long periods of time, and particularly if we bring our shoulders forward, we're likely to sit over the top of our diaphragm. The diaphragm is the body's breathing muscle. It's a dome-shaped muscle. And I always say it looks like a jellyfish, and it sits in just under the base of your ribs there. But if you slouch over the top of it, you're going to compress it in a way that makes breathing harder, makes it more labored, and you tend to overbreathe as a result. So you go from diaphragm breathing to upper chest breathing, and upper chest breathing is big cloud breathing. Okay, so good posture, opening up that diaphragm, letting your belly be soft, will start to release the tension from the diaphragm, which then means your breath can be automatic, can be effortless, can be easy. Okay, the next most important factor when it comes to breathing, and I've already mentioned this, is nose breathing, breathing in and out through the nose only. Now, the nose is a smaller hole, or holes. and so that means when you breathe in and out through the nose only, you're less likely to overbreathe. When you open your mouth, you're more likely to lose carbon dioxide. You're more likely to dehydrate and irritate those airways, as well as inflame those airways so that they shrink. So people who suffer a lot from stuffy noses, blowing their nose a lot, runny noses a lot, often are mouth breathers because they're bringing in unfiltered air, which is irritating their airways, and the body as a response tries to clean it. That's why you get those continual runny noses, stuffiness, and narrowed air passages, which then cultivates the desire to breathe more through your mouth. So the key with getting and unblocking your nose is to breathe gently and slowly through your mouth, which will then prevent those airways getting so dehydrated, and that'll open up the nasal passages. If you just work very gently, slowing it down, making that mouth breath as gentle as you can, you'll open up the nose and you'll be able to get all that you need just through the nose only. Okay, the best runners in the world, the people who can run long distances, are often nose breathers. They're very efficient breathers. The next thing is to allow your breath to be gentle, not deep. We're not trying to force the air in or push the air out. Just let each breath come in and out in its own natural rhythm, in its own natural way. So gentle, not deep. We're not trying to force anything. Let your breath be automatic, like a reflex or a pulse. And the final instruction, and this is really the only active thing I'm going to suggest you do, and not everybody needs to do this, and not everybody can do it initially. You might have to work up to this, and that's to invite your breath to slow down a little bit by adding a little pause between each breath. So breathing in, breathing out, and pause in your own natural rhythm, in your own natural way, communicating to your mind and body that there's no hurry for that next breath, no hurry at all. So slowing down the breath prevents overbreathing as well. Okay, so it's pretty simple. Good posture through the nose, mouth is the backup system, gentle and slow. Now, in order for this to be automatic for pregnancy, you might need to practice. Most people do, because we have lifestyles of sitting, we have high sugar diets, which will drive up breathing. We drink coffee, which will drive up breathing and stimulate the, potentially stimulate and retrain your brain to be more towards that over-breathing response rather than that more efficient, natural, gentle breathing. Okay, so it's good to practice. Practice makes permanent. So that's a nice little saying that I picked up from someone along the path, and it's a really good thing to do. Now, I will warn you, a little bit of a caveat here. If you do start to make your breath more gentle, more slow through the nose with good posture, you've shrunk your cloud quite significantly. And you might feel the need to yawn, sigh, cough, things like that often come. That's your body. What you've done in that moment is you've shrunk your cloud, you've increased your carbon dioxide, and your body's saying, hey, I'm not used to this, and it might want to dump it again. So if you do have the desire to yawn or take a deep breath through the mouth, try to swallow it. and just hold your breath for about 3 seconds and then just breathe as gently as you can through the nose. If you do that, you then prevent your body from releasing that carbon dioxide. The body then has to accommodate it, and that's what will reset the brain. So I've given you some really great little tips there about breathing. And I thought I might just finish this episode of the podcast with a nice little breathing exercise that I do with all of my families, and I'd love to share it with you as well. Now, please don't do this if you're driving, okay? So if you have the time and the space, get really, really comfortable. So find either you can sit or lie if you want to, but whatever position you find yourself in, I'll get you to uncross your arms and legs and make sure your diaphragm is open. So if you are sitting, it can be helpful to have a little pillow under your shoulders to really open up that diaphragm. Let your belly be soft. And when you're ready, I'll just take you through these instructions. So when you've found your comfort, you can just start to relax a little bit. You can close your eyes because that will bring you more awareness to what's happening inside you. And just check right now, how are you feeling? You could be a bit tired. Maybe there's some nervous tension there. Just notice how you're feeling. And then I'll get you to notice your breathing. What's moving when you breathe? Is it your chest? Now, we're often taught belly breathing. Once again, that's a special effects breathing for yoga, but it's not how we need to breathe normally. When you're breathing normally, the only thing that should really be moving is that diaphragm area, and only a little bit, doesn't need to move a lot. So notice what's moving when you breathe. You're not trying to puff anything up. Notice whether your breathing feels easy and effortless. Notice the rhythm of your breath. How fast or slow you're breathing. Does your in-breath match your out-breath? Are you breathing in and out through the nose, the mouth, or both? And can you hear yourself breathe? If you can hear yourself breathe, you might be overbreathing. That's okay. You don't need to do anything about it. Just notice. I just want you to notice these things. These are the things you're going to start to pay attention to. And just notice also if there's any tension in your body. What parts of your body don't feel as comfortable as the rest of you? And now we're going to make a few little gentle alterations to your breathing. Very gentle, very subtle, but very powerful. So you've opened up your diaphragm. And I want you to imagine that your diaphragm is like a jellyfish. And if you've ever seen a jellyfish underwater, it ever so gently pulses with each breath. Your diaphragm works in exactly the same way. There's no need to force the air in or push the air out. Just let each breath come in and out in its own natural rhythm, in its own natural way, just like a jellyfish underwater. It requires no effort at all. Let your breath be like a pulse or a reflex. Gentle, easy breathing. Automatic. No effort. You're not trying to breathe to a count of or get your breath to contort into some shape. Those breathing techniques can be useful under different conditions, but this is not what we're doing. We're trying to get more out of each breath. more oxygen, and let the body relax. So just imagine each breath is like a jellyfish underwater. And now you can take your attention to your nose breathing. And if you're not doing this already, I suspect you are, but just try to breathe in and out through the nose only. If you are struggling with that, then just breathe very gently through the mouth with your mouth just ever so slightly open. We don't want a big mouth, just a little mouth. So let your breath be gentle. We're not, once again, trying to force the air in or push it out. Just let it come in and out in its own natural rhythm, in its own natural way. And you can be reminded that the nose is cleaning and filtering the air. It's warming the air, moistening it, protecting your lungs against irritants. Lovely, gentle nose breathing. And now the final instruction is to just invite your breath to slow down a little bit by adding a little pause between each breath. Breathing in, breathing out, and pause. So you now know that there's no hurry for that next breath. Now, this could be difficult for some of you to do this initially, but over time, the more relaxed you get, the more you down-regulate that stress response, the more natural that pause becomes, because there is actually a natural pause between each breath for someone who breathes optimally, calmly, easily. So if it's a little bit too difficult to do now, that's okay. Don't push it too hard. We don't want your body to feel like it's not getting enough air. But practice this, because over time you'll find that it will slow down and it feels great. You can feel that relaxation response coming in. Your body goes, thank you. I can let go. This is so good. It is a very comfortable feeling. People get amazed at how easy breathing is when they start to remind their body of how to breathe optimally. We're not making it happen. We're just simply creating the right conditions to get more out of each breath. The right conditions are simple: good posture, open diaphragm, lips together through the nose, gentle, automatic, no effort, and slow. That's it. Super, super simple. Now, when you have a contraction, your breath's going to automatically get bigger. But the key with breathing through those contractions is to keep it slow, like you're riding the waves of each breath. Now, some people like to count their breath when they're having contractions. They might breathe in for 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever their count is, and breathe out. And that's a great mind focusing tool. But it's not necessary to reach any particular number. I don't want you to think that you need to make your breath last for 6 counts or 8 or any of that, because you could actually be over-breathing. And it might be better for your breathing pattern to just breathe in for 2 or 3 rather than 6 or 8. We're all different, so trust the intelligence of your body. But over time, you will find this will change. And remember, if you have any impulse to yawn or sigh or try to take a deep breath, just swallow that if you can. Tell your body, no, we're going to keep that extra carbon dioxide. So enjoy the benefits of breathing optimally. When you breathe optimally, it has massive effect on your body. Higher levels of carbon dioxide can open up blood vessels, can release bronchospasm in the lungs, less blood pressure, can help with headaches, can even help with digestion because oxygen feeds every system in the body. So if you've been getting a bit of heartburn, then this type of breathing pattern can soothe smooth muscle like your esophagus, your gut, even your bowel, bladder, colon. All of those things get soothed by good breathing, less tension in the body. So when you're ready, you can just come out of that nice little relaxed place. And I hope you've enjoyed today's episode because it is gold. This knowledge is gold and it is highly misunderstood. There's a lot of people out there teaching breathing and it might work for some people, but it can also cause others to feel faint, dizzy, and like they're hyperventilating. So if you've had that experience in a yoga class or any type of teachings in the past, this will make a lot of sense to you now as to why you potentially felt that way. So once again, this is optimal physiological breathing, breathing in the way the body is designed to breathe to give you the most oxygen. It relaxes your system. It helps you to optimize those inner resources that Mother Nature's given you to not just get through birth, but to feel great about birth. Okay, so have a great day and I will hopefully talk to you next week. If you tune in to listen in, we'll have another story for you for your listening. Thanks. Have a great week. Bye.